Well, officially, the U.S. government wants us to believe that American troops were sent into Afghanistan to fight terrorists and to fight the war on drugs. U.S. officials refer to it as their counter-narcotics mission. Private security firms like Blackwater, where they're getting paid billions of dollars to eradicate Afghan narcotics. Yet somehow the drug production rate in Afghanistan, well, it's reached peak levels. Man, it is at an all-time high. Yet somehow the drug production rate from Afghanistan has reached peak levels. I mean, right now, there is more heroin coming out of Afghanistan than ever before. It's almost as if the U.S. government is dealing the drugs. Say it isn't so. David Knight, billions of dollars are being poured into Afghanistan to fight the drug war, yet here we are with the largest drug production coming out of that area since before 9/11. What's going on out there?
Oh, absolutely. At one point, the Taliban was behind the drug production in Afghanistan, but then they banned it, and it dropped only 10% of the supply. Now, depending on who you look at it, it's 80 to 90% of the world's supply is coming out of Afghanistan since we went there. And every year, it's a bumper crop increase. Now, they've got an increase in Mexico in their production. And of course, in the last 7 years, they've had a 7-fold increase of heroin coming across the border. But the question is that due to their increase, or is that just because the Mexican border is open? And that's going to be the most obvious place that you would smuggle anything, including nukes.
Sure. Now, check this out. I wanted to show you this. According to the U.S. Inspector General, the private security firm Academy, these guys are formerly known as Blackwater, so they've been rebranded, and they have received $309 million from us, from you and me, U.S. taxpayers, to fight the drug war in Afghanistan. And I don't know, what do you think? Do you think they're being double-crossed by Afghan Border Patrol? Or
I think they're doing exactly what they were supposed to do, and that is to make sure that they've got an adequate supply of drugs. Okay, the government is running both sides of this. We pointed this out for a very long time. Just last year, they had a 17% increase in Afghanistan's poppy supply. Okay, it is 22.5 times bigger than the production in Mexico, even after the surge in Mexico. And yet the media is trying to present this as a problem that is rushing in because we've got legalized marijuana in several different states. That is not the problem. It was drug prohibition that created these drug cartels. It just happens to be, yes, they are switching to that. There was an article on Washington Post talking about how they're not making any money anymore. They're actually getting out of the marijuana business. They have farmers in the Sinaloa state, they said, they're no longer even planting the crop. The wholesale price has collapsed from $100 per kilogram to less than $25. One of the farmers there said, it's not worth it anymore. He's been doing this his entire life. He's 50 years old. That's been his profession, a cannabis farmer. He says he can't remember the last time his family and others in the tiny hamlet gave up growing moda. He said, I wish the Americans would stop this legalization. That's the way you stop. You bring it down where it's affordable, where you can control it, and we have to recognize that it has medical uses. It shouldn't be a Schedule I drug.
Yeah, Nixon's the one that made it a Schedule I drug.
Yes, yes. Well, actually, it was the UN who came out with the template 10 years before, just as they've done with Agenda 21. Okay. The UN created the template with the 4 schedules and said, put these drugs in these schedules 10 years before Nixon declared the war on drugs. So this whole thing, conservatives need to understand, this whole thing is a UN agenda. And they also need to understand when they look at the safety issue of it. Again, in this Washington Post article, they said, although prescription painkillers remain more widely abused and account for far more fatal overdoses than heroin, okay? Because people aren't getting fatal overdoses of marijuana. So that's right. The prescription painkillers are really the issue here. Things like OxyContin, the thing that addicted Rush Limbaugh. Some people have suggested that perhaps it's what caused him to lose his hearing, but we don't know. It still highlights the dangerous effects of the prescription drugs.
Well, and Big Pharma, they're the ones that are opposed to the legalization of marijuana more than anyone.
Yes. There was just an article that came out last summer in August by the Journal of the AMA, JAMA. They said the 13 U.S. states that have legalized medical marijuana have seen prescription painkiller overdoses drop by 25%. And remember, it's the prescription pain overdoses that have far more, according to the Washington Post, far more lethal overdoses than even heroin. So that's the most dangerous thing. But we need to get back to this whole idea of what prohibition has cost us. There was just the article that came out today talking about how law enforcement, DEA, has been collecting people's phone records without search warrants for decades.
Way before the NSA started.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All of the evisceration of our rights, all of the destruction of our legal system has been done in the name of the drug enforcement, okay, and the war on drugs. And now they're moving it up and moving it to another area with the war on terrorism. But it all began with the war on drugs. They're just extending it and continuing it now with these two phony wars.
So now I guess the solution, according to the White House, would be more money to fight the war on drugs.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're going to want more.
Right.
They're going to want more of U.S. tax dollars to fight this. And isn't it funny how whenever the U.S. government gets involved, let's say the war on drugs, that means bigger drug cartels, more drugs on the street. Whenever there's a war on terror, there's more terrorists and, for a bigger destabilization of the region. Whenever the U.S. government gets involved, it seems the opposite. It's an Orwellian effect.
Well, and that's exactly what they intended to do. It gives them money for their black operations. And as you pointed out, with Blackwater they're getting paid a humongous amount of money, and yet we still see that production is jumping 17% just last year, even though Blackwater is getting paid a fantastic sum to stop that very thing. It's fraudulent on both ends, but it serves their agenda.
Blackwater's only been beat out by Northrop. They're getting paid a little more so that they're actually in there fighting the war on drugs in Afghanistan. And check this out. In December, the United Nations reported a 60% growth in Afghan land used for the opium crops. That's since 2011. So 60% growth. I can only imagine what those figures would be if they began that from before 9/11, before the U.S. put troops, boots on the ground in Afghanistan.
Absolutely. When I look at this, and I look at the way it's being covered in the mainstream media, they're almost talking about the fact that they're switching over to heroin in Mexico as being something that is the fault of legalization here. Mm-hmm. When the real story is that the way you stop these criminal gangs, and of course they're going to diversify. We saw that happen with Al Capone.
Same thing. I was going to say, it reminds me of Prohibition in the 30s.
Exactly, and they diversified into other things. They diversified into the drugs, for example, okay? But now they're having to turn to kidnapping. They're having to turn to heroin or whatever. The way you stop these drugs is to cut off the profit from these cartels. And this is the number of people that have died in Mexico is off the charts. These drug gangs are brutal. So anything that we can do, like legalization, that will put a hitch in their profits is something I think we ought to take a serious look at. But there's also the medical side of it too. And just, it's one more indication that, yes, there are many, as we pointed out, many times and ways that people can use marijuana for medical purposes. It should not be a Schedule I drug.
And the truth is getting out as far as the medical benefits. Absolutely, truth is getting out. You have children who are having seizures, and they're taking medication using, was it cannabis oil or
yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and then that's the way Tommy Chong, the poster child for marijuana, he treated his cancer with cannabis oil as well.
That's right. I give credit to Rand Paul, because the whole gist of this bill that he's put together with some Democrats as a bipartisan bill is to change marijuana from being a Schedule I drug. And if they were to do that, that would have profound effects. And he's the only presidential candidate that has the integrity to stand up and call this for what it is. The rest of them will say jokingly, yeah, I did it when I was young. They're all saying it. Even Jeb Bush is saying, yeah, I did it when I was young. And yet they would send people to jail for extended periods of time, ruining other people's lives for something that they did for recreational use. Do that to ruin people's life for something that they're taking medically. That's the most amazing thing.
And that, of course, means more people in the corporate prison complex. Thank you, David Knight. Hey, that's going to do it for tonight's broadcast. The InfoWars Nightly News will return, Lord willing, tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time, Texas time, that is. Until then, have a great evening. We'll see you back right here tomorrow night.
From the water table to our soils to the atmosphere itself, our world is becoming more and more toxic each and every day. But it's not just the air outside that's toxic. Indoor air has been shown to have 2 to 5 times higher concentrations of pollutants than even outdoor air. And most Americans spend 90% of their time inside using toxic chemicals within their homes. There are more than 42 million smokers in the United States. Well over 1,000 types of mold and mildew linked to numerous conditions. And don't forget the fact that 6 million Americans live with pets they're allergic to as well. When I began to research these statistics, it was clear to me it was time to start cleansing my lungs in order to combat the toxic environment that we cannot escape but that we can fight back against. Made with organic and wild cultivated herbs and manufactured in the USA, the new InfoWars Life Lung Cleanse is here in a convenient spray bottle that can be brought with you throughout any toxic environment. Now available exclusively at InfoWarsLife.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.
You are watching the InfoWars Nightly News, which airs 7 p.m. Central at InfoWarsNews.com. And your support is helping us defend liberty worldwide.